Hi guys, welcome back to the fourth episode of The Path to a New Edition, detailing the playtest packages for D&D Next. Now this video I go over the fourth package, and it came out only 21 days, only 3 weeks after the last one. So I get a feeling there must have been problems with the third package because there are a lot of quick revisions here. For example, the Sorcerer and the Warlock, which were introduced in the last one, are now gone. So whatever they'd done with those was not being liked. There's also a few other changes and a few fixes, and this is pretty much a complete package. There's only one file in it which hasn't been revised from the last one. Everything else has been updated. But let's go over to the desktop and have a look. So, upon opening Pack 4, we're greeted with a Read First document. It's just an updated version of the update document that we've had in the previous ones, which goes through the changes we're seeing in this pack. So we've got the using this material section at the start, telling us to use the how to play, character creation, and DM's guidelines. And we've got general rule changes. So this is the actual changes. Well, they've expanded it up to level 10. They're including level 6 to 10 within it now, which makes a lot of sense, because the Reclaiming Blingdenstone adventure, which they included with the last pack, is a series of 6 connected adventures. So going through playtesting and generally guessing that you're probably going to let people level about one level per adventure, that means that you're going past the 5 first levels. So expanding this makes a lot of sense, and I get a feeling that's the direction they're starting to experiment a bit now. They're quite happy with some of the changes they made to the core, but they want to check how those are enhanced as you go up levels. So what else we got? We've got opportunity attacks. You no longer have advantage when you do an attack of opportunity. They've included a couple of experimental rules for healing. Well, they haven't really. They've muddied around with them a bit, but generally these are the ones, the various options that we saw in the last pack included once again, just modified slightly. Got concentration, so spells require concentration, or at least some of them. So we're starting to introduce that. We've got various types of new actions. We've got critical hits being revised, including 2-weapon fighting and stealth and perception. We've also changed some of the classes. So the Cleric's Channel Divinity feature has been cut. The class now has a Turn Undead feature. So Channel Divinity in 5th edition includes a lot of features, including Turn Undead. But it looks like they can experiment in that direction, but they've decided to go back, at least temporarily. We'll see when they reintroduce that. Fighters' expertise dice progression has been changed, and new combat maneuvers have been added. However, the maneuvers are different, but we'll come back to that. The rogue now has expertise dice and gets access to various maneuvers, including sneak attack. Skill mastery and knack features have been removed. Sorcerer and Warlocks do not appear in this packet. As a result of playtest feedback, we're exploring new approaches to these classes, as well as new options for magic. So obviously, some of the stuff I picked up about Sorcerer, and as I said last time, I'm not really familiar with Warlock, but they weren't popular. So they've stripped them back out, and they're looking at new options. And we've got Wizards. They've got starting hit points have been raised, and their spellcasting ability has undergone significant changes tied to the addition of traditions of wizardry. So they're obviously starting to play around with that idea. Spell changes, we've got the expanded levels, there's been some additions and deletions, revisions to spell descriptions, and they've added words of power now. The maneuvers that previously appeared in the fighter have been pulled into a separate document. Maneuvers are now available to the fighter and the rogue. So they've taken sneak attack from rogue and the various maneuvers of the fighter and then bundled them in together, allowing both fighters and rogues to choose from them. Which, given rogues tend to be a second line fighter, a fighter who gets to do more sneaky stuff, makes a lot of sense. Plus, when you're dealing with rangers and things who can be quite sneaky, being a type of fighter, that makes a lot of sense to take all these maneuvers and put them in together and allow different people to choose, to allow more variety. So you can be a sneaky fighter or you can be a more brutal rogue. What else we got here? Character creation, so skills. Character now starts with 4 skills instead of 3. Customizing ability scores have been added. XP advancement levels up to level 10. The background skills skill list has been revised and new backgrounds have been added. Specialties and Feats. Some of the specialities previously appearing in the playtest are not in this release. Others have been added. And we've got feat revisions. Magic items haven't really changed. DM guidelines have changed for combat encounters, and shadows are now referred to as dim light. And monster changes. Dozens of monsters have been added to support higher level play. Many of the monsters have had their statistics readjusted. Recharge mechanic was added to a number of monsters. Optional traits and actions. Certain monsters now have traits or actions that can be added at the DM's discretion. So you can add fighting styles. So instead of all the player characters having interesting combat abilities, but as soon as they come up with a monster which is an elf or a dark elf or whatever, they can only just hit. Now they can have fighting styles as well and be a bit more interesting. Fixed damage option. So instead of having to roll, then they do a fixed amount of damage per hit. Going on to the next document, we've got the how to play. Well, this is mainly the same. It's starting to get a bit longer. There's 24 pages of it now. We go through the attacks, saving throws, advantage and disadvantage, the ability scores, strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. Then on to exploration. These look very familiar to anybody who's looked through any Dungeons & Dragons rules, and there are only slight differences. We're starting to get to obscured areas, staying quiet, being detected, benefits of being hidden. Got perceptions. Then we're on to the combat. So, how to deal with initiative, all the standard rules here. We've got the actions in combat. It's really starting to get quite long with the different actions. So you can push people, etc. Basics, including critical fails and critical hits. Melee attacks, ranged attacks, damage rolls. Actually, we'll come back to damage in a bit because I've missed something out the last couple of packages about races. I didn't notice it before, but when I went back and looked, they include. Got the healing, as I said, the optional rules for slower recovery, experimental rule for rests, experimental for healing and rests. Got the different conditions which are applied. Then we're on to magic, explaining how they work, cloud effects, duration, combining magical effects. Then we're on to the DM's guidelines, which again are a stripped down version of the Dungeon Master guide. So we've got 15 pages here. Resolving tasks, checks as a DM tool, ignoring the dice, tasks and skills with different DCs for tasks, dexterity based ones, constitution based ones, different DCs for all the attributes, and reasons why you would apply them. So, a charisma one, an easy task might be entertaining a crowd with a tall tale, but a very hard task would be rearing a wild animal, or formidable would be taming a wild animal. Checks and interaction, incidental tasks, we've got the creature sizes, illumination, encounters and rewards, which have been apparently quite heavily revised, and different treasure you might get. On to the character creation section, which is very similar, where we've got the standard choose a race, choose a class, then optional choose a background, choose a specialty. Then we've got assigning the ability scores, figuring out combat numbers, adding finishing touches such as equipment, describing, alignment, etc. Taking us through to play, and then we've got advancement with the various experience levels. We've got an example character sheet. We're still sticking with the very early format of it here, but if you notice, the next section has changed slightly. Where in the early ones it had 4 columns for the abilities from your race, from your class, from your background, and from your specialty, we've now got them down to class features, racial traits, and skills, with feats below. we're starting to look very familiar to 3rd and 5th edition. We've got the races. Now, this is something I missed before, that they introduced something here. So we have Dwarven weapon training. Whenever you attack with an axe or a hammer, which you are proficient, the damage die for that weapon increases by 1 step, from d4 to d6, d6 to d8, d8 to d10, d10 to d12, d12 to 2d6. So, dwarves using traditional dwarven weapons such as an axe and hammer will gain a dice size with that weapon. And carrying on to the elf, and they get it as well. Elf weapon training, when you attack with a longsword, shortbow, or longbow with which you have a proficiency, damage die for that weapon increases 1 step from d6 to d8 or d8 to d10. Now, that's nice to have, but is a really bad thing to have in a game. Back in 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons, or Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, elves had their training with longsword, short sword, and longbow, I think, were the 3 weapons they got. It's slightly different to the list that's there. And they gained a +1 to hit with those. Which meant when treasure was getting doled out, and there was a 2-handed sword and a longsword with a magical bonus on it, the humans would always end up with the non-longsword or non-short sword. Because the elf is like, well, why should I use that? Because I get a +1 to hit with that other weapon. I'm losing something for gaining a magical weapon. So, humans always got sort of short-handed because they would take the more obscure weapons, which the elves didn't get the bonus with. And now we're introducing dwarves with axes as well. And you're pigeonholing these species into using a type of weapon. Because any sensible player, why are you going to bother using anything else when you get a bonus to use it? You get extra damage out of it. So, I'm not keen on that. And as we know, by 5th edition they've stripped that out. And by the next version, Pack 5, they're introducing a lot of different ways of doing damage. So I think they're going to strip that out fairly soon. Halflings obviously don't get any bonus. Oh, I'm lying, they do. Halfling weapon train. When you attack with a dagger, a short sword, or a sling, they gain. So humans are the only species who do not get a bonus with any weapon type. Now, while I'm not in favour of all species being the same, or the races being exactly the same, I do think that humans should get benefits which are unique to be human. It shouldn't be elves are more dexterous humans. Dwarves are shorter and stronger and more durable humans. Halflings are smaller and sneakier humans. They should be their own things, and humans should be their own things as well. So, I'm sorry, but I really dislike the fact that they're not giving humans their own abilities here. They're coping by just giving them the 1 starting ability score of your choice increases by 2, and all of your other abilities scores increase by 1. So they're getting a general bonus across the board, but that's not special. Go on, we've got the classes. They're starting to look a bit stripped down. As I said, I've got a feeling this version they're trying to simplify things and test higher levels. Now we go through the fighters, rogues, and wizards. We've got the backgrounds and skills. They're still looking fairly familiar, but not absolutely great. We've got the charlatan here. And the charlatan still gets the trait false identity. You created a second identity that includes documentation. So you are getting a bonus for your backgrounds, but your background is really just deciding what skills you get. So if you're a charlatan, you get bluff, disguise, persuade, and sleight of hand. So you're choosing your background to decide which starting skills you get. I'm guessing that if you're creating a character without a background, if you're not bothering that, you just get to choose which skills you want. We've got jesters, minstrels, nobles, sages. I do like these. And then we've got the skill descriptions themselves, something which was lacking from some of the earlier packages. We've got specialties and feats. So we've got various feats here, and we have specialties. So an ambush specialist, who gets different abilities on 1st level, 3rd, 6th and 9th. Arcane Magic Specialist. Divine Magic Specialist. So the specialties have changed a lot since the first package, when really all they were was a way of gaining a bonus feat. You would choose a specialty and get a feat which would affect. And while it's quite nice getting these extra abilities for choosing your specialty, I liked the simplicity of the early ones, where you were customizing your character but using the rules that already existed. You weren't just patching more and more rules on top. And the next package is equipment. As I said, this isn't updated much, it just is your standard Dungeons & Dragons equipment. So, different types of armour, different types of weapons, adventuring gear, etc. We've got the magic items, which again hasn't updated much, but these are fairly standard. So you've got swords, weapons, wands, rods. Nothing much special. Then we're on to the manoeuvres. Well, as I said, these are becoming something that different fighter types can choose from. So I'm assuming that in later versions, if they'd gone with this, you'd be getting paladins and rangers being able to choose from these. However, they are still separated, because we've got a fighter manoeuvre list and a rogue manoeuvre list. So while both get access to composed attack, fighters don't get access to sneak attack, for example. Rogues don't get access to cleave. So we've got our own ones we can pick from. They're becoming like spells. Whereas we have a general spell list that different wizard types, sorcerers, warlocks, clerics can choose from. In this we've got fighting manoeuvres that the different fighting types can pick from, but they have their own individual lists. We've got the spell lists, at this moment cut down to cleric spells and wizard spells. And then we've got some adventures. And we've got the Caves of Chaos. While I understand them including this, I'm starting to wonder why they're including it again and again, especially as, while this hasn't been modified from the last version, it was updated from the very first version. And if these are playtests, you're not going to be playing the same adventure over and over again. They should be providing different adventures. And to a degree they are. So we've got an updated version of Reclaiming Blindenstone, which makes a lot of sense, because in 3 weeks you won't have gone through the 6 mini-adventures included in it, so having an updated version of the adventure to use with these updated rules makes a lot of sense. And finally, we've got Isle of Dread, which was an adventure given away with the expert set of the Beckme, which I covered fairly recently. And it's an adventure which is apparently based on King Kong. If we flick through, we can see it's based on an island. The idea of you going to a mysterious island where there's savages and monsters and different things which aren't encountered anywhere else in the world. And that's the Isle of Dread. It's a very combat-heavy adventure from what I've been told. There's not a lot of interesting stuff to do in it, but it's a pretty decent starting adventure. Or not starting, because it was with the expert set, and it's kind of designed for slightly higher levels in here. Does it say at the start? For levels 3 to 7, so not quite starting characters. But that was pack 4. I think there's some interesting changes in there, but I think there's a lot more to come. So hopefully I'll see you in the next video. And as always, thank you very, very much for watching. But most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.